Welcome to the Sermon in the Valley with Pastor Rob Eller. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends and family. Thank you. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me. Then the righteous answered, Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you? And the king will answer them, Truly I tell you, just as you did it to the one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me. If that sounds familiar, I've used that in a couple different episodes previously. It's been a couple months actually since I last used it. You may already know what I'm about to talk about based on when I used those verses. If your guess is he's going to talk about the homeless shelter again, well, then you'd be correct. On today's episode of the Sermon in the Valley, we are once again talking about the Friends of the Homeless of Tuscarawas County and their bid to try to build a new homeless shelter for the county. 2 months ago, when I last talked about this, there was a community meeting and the city government rejected their bid to build on a piece of property that was located near a creek along a floodplain. The community leaders had neighborhood people were against it, even though the school district was for, and a local church had even come out against it. And when I read that, I was appalled to see that someone who was considered a colleague of mine, though I'd never met this person, this member of the clergy, had come out against this shelter. Well, it's been 2 months. And in those 2 months, the shelter found their fifth piece of property to try to pursue. It was further out away from the city. It was just towards the city limits in an area that used to be a drive-in movie theater. There are some concerns with the property with having to have utility hookups and all that, but it seemed like a good piece of property. A little far from the city, a little far from the social services needed, but I'm sure the shelter could find a way to rectify that through transportation. Well, this week, the city government of New Philadelphia has once again rejected their bid to build on that land. The fifth time the city has said, no, we are not going to grant you the variance needed to build that. We are not going to approve of that shelter in that area. I'm getting tired of this. I am getting so tired of seeing that. I'm sure some of you who listen to me are probably getting tired of me talking about it. But if you're like me, you're getting tired of seeing it as well. Because that is not how we treat our neighbors. The central theme of the Gospels has been love one another. That phrase is used over a dozen times throughout the New Testament. Jesus' great commandment to us was to love our neighbor as ourselves. That is not showing neighborly love. That is not showing neighborly love. They can give all kinds of platitudes. They can talk to their blue in the face, but they cannot justify those actions against our neighbors. The homeless are not a nuisance. They are people just like the rest of us. As I said before, many of us have been one paycheck away from being homeless ourselves. And until you're in that position, you don't quite understand the gravity of the situation. The kind of pain and frustration and anxiety you're under, trying to find a place to sleep, trying to find a roof over your head. Until you're in that situation, you don't understand it. But they are people just like the rest of us. They continue to hide behind this whole thing of, well, we're not going to rezone it. Here's the thing. Our zoning laws were written before homeless shelters were even conceived. So there is no zone for a shelter like that. No matter what area they go to find, they throw the zoning law back at them. They try to find a piece of property that's zoned commercial, because as a nonprofit, they should be able to operate in a commercial zone. They say no, because that'll stifle commercial growth. That won't create jobs. Okay, fine, they try a residential neighborhood, because as a shelter, they're technically a multi-family residence. But no, we won't grant you the variance to go into a residential neighborhood, because that would be bad for the neighborhood. They need to stop hiding behind the ambiguity of the zoning laws and just admit that they don't want to help the homeless in our area. They need to just stop hiding behind those laws and say, you know what, and just admit that they don't want to help the homeless. It's become abundantly clear they have no intention on revising those zoning laws to even help the shelter. It's time they stop trying to pretend they care, because it's clear that they don't. If they did care, they'd be offering alternative solutions to the shelter. Realistic alternative solutions. Not the ones where they say, hey, here are some properties that are not even in our town or in our jurisdiction. Check those properties out. That's right. Months ago, when they were fighting for a piece of, when the shelter was trying to build on one of their early proposals, the city's response was to give them a list of 5 properties in our neighboring city, in Dover, that they thought, well, these will be suitable for you. They weren't even available or on the market. They weren't even close to being suitable for what the shelter needed. And when Dover city government found out about it, they were upset. Understandably so, because they weren't consulted on this. The city needs to either put up or shut up. I hate to be blunt, that's what's come down to. They act like they care, but it's clear that their actions say otherwise. The shelter just needs to build a new building. The homeless need a place to shelter in the evening. The homeless shelter offers so many vital services to our community. They aren't just a place for people to sleep at night and get a hot meal. They offer social services. They offer a way for people to find jobs, to get into rehab if they're facing drug issues. So many people have been helped by that mission and ministry, that to let it go, to just not help them succeed in the future, is going to do such irreparable damage to our community. People think that if we just get rid of the homeless shelter, the homeless will go away. That's not how it works. Just because there's no shelter doesn't mean there's not going to be any homeless people, or people that are homeless, I should say. What happens is they end up on the streets. And then it becomes a bigger problem. They need a place to find rest and to find help. That shelter is how they do it. Once again, in the description for this episode, I will have a link for you to donate to the shelter. I implore all of you who listen to this to call the city government, talk to your local city council rep, implore them to find a meaningful solution to this. And if they aren't willing to just admit that they don't want to help, and then to get out of the way and let the shelter pursue elsewhere. It breaks my heart seeing this constant story in the news. The shelter finds a piece of property. They do some planning work to figure out, okay, how can we make this work? Take it to the city, and the city says no. It's been months. It's been actually probably over a year now since they first started this. This has to stop. We need to help our neighbor. Martin Luther, in his Christmas sermon, implored the people that he was preaching to, no, you say you want to help Christ? Help your neighbor. Christ is in your neighbor. That's what I was getting at with the reading from Matthew. Christ is in everybody. If we refuse to help our neighbor, if we refuse to help the homeless, we are refusing to help Christ. Jesus isn't some lofty preacher in a multi-million-dollar church somewhere. Jesus is the person we encounter on the streets, the person who asks us for help. And to refuse that help is to refuse Jesus. It is the antithesis of our faith. So again, I ask you, contact your local city officials. Implore them to do the right thing or to get out of the way. Please. The shelter needs our help. They really do. There's a big sign in the town square here at the corner of High and Broadway. It's on top of one of the buildings. It dates back to, I believe, the 1920s. So it's almost 100 years old. And it lights up at night saying, "Welcome to our city." And as I said before, the way the shelter is being treated runs contrary to what that sign says. Because what I'm seeing is the sign saying, "Welcome to our city," but only if you check off these certain boxes. If you're homeless, you're not welcome here. That's the impression I'm getting from this. Everyone should be welcome here. Just like here at my church, everyone is welcome here in our church. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter your background. We don't care. Everyone's a child of God. And as such, all children of God are welcome in this church. All people should be welcome in this city. But those actions of the city government don't reflect that. I wish I had a happier episode today for all of you. But maybe I will next week. Once again, thank you for listening to me ramble on here about this topic that's really near and dear to my heart. If you like what you hear, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Share this podcast with your friends and family. Especially share this episode and the other prior episodes where I talk about this. I believe it's episodes 4 and episodes 8 are the other episodes I talk about the shelter. Listen to those episodes. Listen to this episode. Share them with people who need to hear this. Share them with the people in charge. Maybe we can change them. Maybe we can change their hearts and minds to do the right thing. As always, have a good and blessed day, everyone.